Welcome back to CIA Declassified, the broadcast that analyzes the documents revealing how intelligence agencies seek to control not just the actions of individuals, but the architecture of shared reality. We shift our focus today from the physiological battlefield of Project Artichoke to the informational battlefield of Project Poppycock. Active in later post-Cold War environments, Poppycock represented the CIA's pragmatic, almost cynical realization that the greatest threat to truth is not a lie, but sheer, overwhelming, paralyzing nonsense. In an age of information saturation, the critical strategic objective is no longer to hide data, but to drown it in noise. The goal of Project Poppycock was to engineer this noise, to create absurdity so potent, so instantly discrediting, that any logical analysis became impossible. Our primary evidence is the declassified file CIA-RDP90-00445R000300100025-2. This report is titled, quote, Strategic Absurdity and Linguistic Destabilization, end quote. It confirms that resources were dedicated to linguistic analysis, behavioral psychology, and complex game theory to evaluate the creation of, quote, self-discrediting narratives, end quote. The core motivation was pragmatic. How do you defeat an enemy whose communication is centralized and predictable? You destroy the foundation of their logic by flooding their system with internally contradictory, instantly viral, and profoundly illogical content. The enemy becomes consumed trying to logically dismantle a narrative that was never logical to begin with. The analysis focuses on three primary areas: the taxonomy of absurdity, engineering the self-discrediting statement, and the documentation of systemic cognitive overload in adversarial targets. Let's drill down into the disturbing methodology sanctioned under Project Poppycock. The researchers sought to systematically map the vulnerabilities of the human rational mind when confronted with organized yet nonsensical information. The methodology began with the taxonomy of absurdity. The document breaks down illogical disclosure into usable strategic categories. 1. The perfect non sequitur, a statement that follows all grammatical rules but contains no semantic connection to the preceding context, e.g., our fiscal policy is sound because all horses eventually wear hats. This forces the listener's brain to search for a link that doesn't exist, wasting cognitive energy. 2. The immediate self-contradiction, a statement that refutes itself within the span of a sentence or two, e.g., we have achieved total transparency, which is why all records must remain sealed. This undermines trust in the speaker regardless of the topic. And 3. The a priori discrediting detail, inserting small, instantly unbelievable detail into an otherwise plausible narrative, e.g., announcing a major policy shift while claiming the meeting was chaired by an anthropomorphic banana. The absurdity becomes the only memorable fact, negating the policy news. The engineering of these statements was the core task. The goal was to create content that was high yield, meaning a minimal investment and time in deployment resulted in maximum destruction of the target's credibility. The files contain specifications for measuring the duration of cognitive dysfunction, how long the average adversarial analyst spent trying to rationally process the absurdity before giving up. A successful Poppycock campaign was one that resulted in high DCD and immediate public discrediting. Quote number 1 from a Poppycock operational report, quote, the deployment of the quadrilateral pineapple mandate effectively resulted in DCD metric exceeding 72 hours among target analysts, demonstrating the severe neurological impact of sustained engineered logical collapse, end quote. And another quote from a memo concerning strategic viability, quote, the most effective technique is to utilize established terminology and link it to an instantly discrediting, universally understood object or concept. The resulting cognitive dissonance is highly infectious and requires minimal maintenance, end quote. The focus shifted from how do we make them believe our lie to how do we make them incapable of believing anything at all. We now confront the strategic deployment detailed within the Project Poppycock files. The intent was not passive. It was to use absurdity as an active agent of systemic cognitive overload. When an adversarial institution or leader is consistently forced to address and logically refute engineered nonsense, two things happen. One, legitimacy burnout. They waste vast political and intellectual capital defending against something meaningless. The public starts to perceive the institution as obsessed with trivia, or worse, as having something to hide beneath the absurdity. And two, internal chaos. The adversarial media and political structures are forced to cover the absurd statement, leading to contradictory analysis, internal friction, and the general slowing of all logical processes. The file revealed that the ideal deployment involved a slow drip saturation campaign, carefully escalating the level of linguistic destabilization over a period of weeks. The primary finding from Poppycock was that the human brain's natural bias towards pattern recognition is its greatest weakness in information warfare. When the brain is presented with a clear pattern, e.g., a leader is speaking about policy, but the content itself breaks the rules of logic, the entire system enters a state of perpetual paradox. The ultimate conclusion was chilling. The weaponization of illogical thought provides a non-kinetic means of achieving strategic chaos, neutralizing an adversary's capacity for coordinated action by crippling its ability to think rationally. The CIA later classified the methods, preferring that the public believe the world's pervasive nonsense is simply a natural occurrence rather than a potentially engineered systematic attack on shared reality. We conclude our analysis of the files linked to Project Poppycock. The existence and scope of this program confirm the U.S. intelligence views absurdity not as a side effect of modern life, but as a potent, deployable strategic weapon designed to induce systemic cognitive overload. The implication is that the greatest modern challenge is discerning the signal of genuine information from the noise of engineered chaos. The only defense is maintaining a rigid standard of local integrity and refusing to engage with deliberately illogical narratives. If this documented truth has opened your mind and reinforced your determination to understand the world as it truly operates, we rely on your support. First, like this episode and leave us a detailed 5-star review wherever you listen. This is how the analysis exposes the deeper strategic agendas. Second, share this episode with someone obsessed with media theory, critical thinking, or linguistic philosophy. We need more sharp minds analyzing these documented facts. Now, a programming note for our listeners. Our next episode will step back in time, directly preceding Project Artichoke, to examine the foundational authorization of the most feared concept in intelligence history, the Manchurian Candidate. We will analyze the files linked to Project Bluebird, the precursor program specifically dedicated to the formal investigation of hypnotic command and personality modification. For our next investigation, we'll dissect and analyze CIA document RDP50 00001R000100010001-1, a foundational file concerning hypnotic command and memory implantation. What were the core experimental parameters for creating a complete personality split in a subject? What did the researchers deem necessary to ensure the subject maintained total psychological distance from the implanted command set? And what does this reveal about the agency's earliest, most explicit strategic goal of creating a completely programmable, untraceable operative? Tune in for our next episode, CIA Declassified, Project Bluebird, the first assassin. Until then, remember, maintain your vigilance, question the source of the noise, and keep your critical thinking sharp. I'll see you in the archives.